Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. How sounds occur in nature? Sounds occur in nature in several ways, such as number one, collision of two objects. So we have to demonstrate, or I just say read? Or
Or just say them as it is, and I'll probably just say the full bullet points here.
okay. Number two, divergence of two objects between which are cohesive forces. Number three, vibration of an object. Number four, friction of a coarse object against another. Now we have, shall I continue? Definition of a letter.
Yeah, so basically just going back to that slide. So here, just to remember, these are the only basically 4 ways that you make sound. And that's how your throat actually works. Some letters, they'll need a collision. And when you hear them, like, for example, da, for example, or da, or d in English, is basically using the tongue with the roof of the mouth. An example of divergence here is talking in English. You could refer to it as ra or la, or we'll cover this in detail. But ra or la, as you go, if you do al like this, the air is actually going around the tongue, and as you drop the tongue, the sound changes. Same thing with ra. So it's as the tongue diverges, so there's a sound change. You got things with vibration, for example, and friction, like adj, for example, ja for friction. So these are key things to remember. Just these 4 key points as you're going through and trying to remember the makharij. Yeah, inshallah, we'll do the next one, bro.
Definition of a letter.
Yep.
A letter is a sound which depends on a specific or approximate articulation point.
So anyone here can give examples of approximate and specific? What are the approximate and the specific letters in Arabic? Has anybody come across this before?
Nope.
So here, I'll give you an example. So let's just say it's pretty easy. There's only 3 letters that are approximate, and these are the mad letters. So waw, alif, ya. And when you try it, wa, ya. For example, ma, when you put the alif at the end of the ma, or ka, that's what they mean with the alif. And then try something like adj, or add, or ka, or qa. So with the approximate ones, what we're doing is the mad letters. The reason why we say they're approximate is we drag them out. So they don't have to end at a specific point. But the specific letters, they require something really specific. Like, for example, it has to be, you could say, the collision or the vibration of something. These things are required. You need something specific in order to just specifically generate that sound. But for mad letters, they start off the throat and they finish at a later destination. So just remember that the approximate ones are waw, alif, ya. So for any questions about that point? Okay, that's good. We'll carry on to the next one, inshallah, how letters occur.
Can you explain, like, as per the book, alif, an approximate articulation point, lengthening of alif?
Yeah, so here we're talking, the alif specifically we're referring to is not the hamza, like the We're referring to an alif al-madiyya, or the one that, extends the sound. So like ma, qa, fa. So that one, that's the one that's approximate, because it actually drags out the thing.
Oh, okay, got it.
And as you're aware with mad can be 2, 4, 6 harakat long. So that's why it's approximate. You can do the same thing with waw, same thing with ya. But with da, you can't go like that, because it's just too doesn't let you drag it out. So it has to be specific. So, hopefully it's all good.
Yes, alhamdulillah, understood.
Okay.
Yeah, the next is how letters occur in the human speech system. Number one, the non-vowel sakin letter. It is emitted by collision between 2 parts of the speech organ. Example, meme, sakina, by the collation of the lips.
Yeah, we'll carry on, inshallah.
Okay. Number 2, the vowel letter. It is emitted by separating between the two parts of the speech organ, accompanied by the articulation point of the origin of its haraka. Example, meme with a fatha by a separation of the lips. Number 3, the letters of lengthening, mud, and softness, lean, line. They are emitted by the vibration of the vocal cords in the larynx. It is accompanied by opening of the mouth with the letter alif, while the tongue is in the position of the rest. Example, lengthening alif. Number 3. Oh, sorry, I think it's continuous. Again, number 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
The letters of lengthening and softness is explanation. They are emitted by the vibration of the vocal cords. It's the same thing. Circling the lips with the letter vowel while raising the furthest part of the tongue.
Okay, so here's a quick question. I have to. Here, basically, he does the same thing. He does it with a wow and he does it with a yeah. And as you can see, the tongue basically changes, but the throat remains the same. Now, this is a tricky question. I'll aim this specifically at the Ijaza level students and other people, because this is discussing new scientific findings as well. So when you're taught the mad or the mad letters, where do they actually come from? When we look at the cross section of the human anatomy in terms of the mouth and the throat, where do the mad letters come from?
Is it the vocal cords, because that's the cross section shown?
Yes, so we got the vocal cords. Does anyone have another opinion by any chance, or is it just the other than the vocal cords?
Maybe because to grab people's attention.
Oh no, I mean not why the mad might be there, but I'm talking about where does it come from in terms of physically, in terms of the human anatomy, from makharij. It does grab attention. I know what you mean. It does grab attention, but on the body, where does it come from?
I think empty part of the mouth.
So which part of the mouth?
Empty part of the mouth.
Oh yes. I think here in Arabic you're referring to is called al-jawf, if I'm correct. Empty part.
Al-jaw, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, we got that. We got any other opinions, or that's basically it?
I think the lower part of the neck. What is it called?
Yes, kind of like, I think it's
The
al-jawf.
haruf al-halqi. The haruf al-halqi. So I think the is from there, and that's the lower part.
Yeah, so we had vocal cord, we had halq, we had al-jawf.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Obviously, we're talking about a cavity of some sort. So I
Mhm.
understand where that's coming from. Here's a tough question. If it comes from al-jawf, then how would you explain فلما ذهبوا? So yes, we're saying it's from the jawf, and you'll find, and I'm not saying it's incorrect, you'll find a lot of the old Tajweed books, especially we call them al-Aqdamin, or the earlier scholars now, they'll have, and you I always thought this as well, to be honest, is jawf. Jawf is where it comes from, you bring it from the chest, and obviously goes through the vocal cords and throat, and it reverberates, and then that's how you get mad, because obviously you breathe in before you do mad, right? The tricky part is, if I can't say dhahabu with my lips open. You see what I mean? So you have to say dhahabu, the mad has to be said, it has to come from a jawf, but my lips have to be round. Am I correct? As it shows in the diagram. So how do we resolve that conflict? Because it sounds like the book is contradicting itself. Am I right?
I just thinking about it, I feel that it's about the point where the collision or the separation or something happens, not where it's an empty thing. For example, when we said the ba, the meeting of the lips makes the ba sound, but the ah part happens when nothing is being touched. So the
Oh,
initial
that's interesting.
the initial point of the sound is actually the vocal cords, and from there onwards, nothing is colliding, nothing is separating, nothing's happening. So could that be the answer?
Yep, no, this is good. Okay, that's perfect. So what we'll do, we'll finish phase 39, have we? Just double check.
No, I think the meme is left.
Just last part left, yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that one, and then we'll up to the next page, and that'll explain what Brother Saad just said.
Yeah, number 3, the letters of lengthening and softness. They are emitted by the vibration of the vocal cord in the larynx. It is accompanied by lowering the lower jaw and raising the middle of the tongue with the letter ya.
Yes, so inshallah, it's pretty interesting. As you can see, if you flip to the next page, they'll summarize basically what we just said. So basically, you can see those 3 diagrams in the bottom, page 40. It starts with the throat, and as the sound is going through the mouth, it reverberates and changes. And that's, subhanAllah, you end up using the specific, as we said earlier, we said there's a proximate and there is a specific, you could say, makharij points or articulation points. So what happens, you start off with al-jawf, and then that gets transformed, mashallah, that emptiness gets transformed by a specific articulation point, and the composite, the addition of both, gets you the mad sound. So what this is basically based on, and Dr. Ayman Sway did this with research and did it with cameras. So they said now, and this is where you can have a difference of opinion in terms of madahib, as they call them, madahib in the qira'ah. But this, you have to be really up there to kind of like be forming your own opinion, because technically you're passing on just information, right? We're not adding, subtracting to the Tajweed. But what this basically means in the way of teaching Tajweed in the old style, al-Aqdamin, you'll definitely see that everyone's going to agree, yes, it's definitely al-Jawf. But obviously now with high-tech equipment, we can confidently say that, yes, it is al-Jawf. That's where the mad starts from, but it finishes off at the specific point of articulation that is specific to the mad. For example, if it finishes with a waw, you say dhahabu. So it starts with the jawf and then it ends with the lips. With the ya, as we can see, you raise the tongue. So let's just say Muse, for example, you see I'm raising the back of my tongue and bringing it closer to the roof of my mouth. That's the ending of the mad. So yeah, that's a really tricky one. So yes, its mad does start from the jawf, but it finishes on the waw alif ya point. And that, mashallah, is exactly what we mean about approximate letters. Any questions about that specific makhraj, makharij relating to the mad?
Does that mean that there are two points of interest? One is, of course, the vocal cords where it initiates, but then there's a part of the jaw that assists in particular sound. That's why we get the a, o, e. Is that what it's saying?
Yeah, so basically it starts off at you could say around the vocal cords in the back of the mouth, around the jawf area, and then it ends in the middle or front of the mouth, depending on how the mad finishes. So yeah, because it's approximate, it's one, you think of it as one bringing in the air and one is controlling what's coming out. So if you have a narrow passage, then a ya is going to come out, or like a broken sound. If you have something like a ooh, obviously it's going to be a different sifa characteristic. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yep. Now I understand why it's called approximate, not specific, basically.
Yes. So yeah, that's basically it. So any more questions about huruf mad? All good. We'll read the page 41. So it's talking about the attention part, the lengthening of the letters.
Attention. The lengthening letters were ascribed to the whole vocal passage, the empty space in the mouth and throat al-jawf, because they are emitted with the least pressure of the voice. So the tongue is in the position of rest with the letter alif, and its middle rises at the letter ya. Its furthest point rises at the letter waw, along with circling the lips while pronouncing it. The non-lengthening waw and ya were ascribed to their articulation points because the pressure of the voice with them is more than that in the lengthening ones, and Allah knows best.
All good. I think we'll probably grab somebody else for the throat. Any volunteers for the throat? Bahal?
I'll read it, sir.
All good.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The throat. It includes 3 articulation points for 6 letters. Number 1, the furthest part of the throat, the articulation point of Hamza and Ha. Number 2, the middle of the throat, the articulation point of Ain and Ha. And number 3, the closest part of the throat, the articulation point of the letter Ghain and Kha. So we have like 3 part of throats: Aqsal Halq, Wastal Halq, and Adnal Halq. Should I continue to next page? You want to explain?
Brother Ibrahim, are you there?
I think he is writing.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah. Yeah, mashallah, as you can see, with the order of this book is done in such a way that it's not in alphabetical order, which we covered earlier. It's basically done it's done in accordance to the syllabus of Jazariya of Imam Jazari. If you've memorized the poem, then that's exactly how you would go through the poetry line by line. For example, it says مخارج الحروف 17 الذي اختار مختبر. So talking about 17 pronunciation points. فألف وجاء فوق تاهي حروف مد للهواء تنتهي. ومن أقصى حلقي همز هاء. So basically, as you can see, mashallah, in the poem it starts with the mad, then it talks about specifically حروف الحلقية and so on. So if you memorize the poem, at the end of the day, which some of you will probably have to for ijaza, if you're doing it by hifz, of course. What this basically means is now you're on page 42, but in Jazariya, you're probably on line 20 something. So memorizing the poem, mashallah, is actually part of the ijaza syllabus, and it's in line with this book. So mashallah, what the book does is explain everything in detail. So I know, jazakallah khair, bro. So yeah, you explain it really well. So you got 3 different levels and 3 types of levels of huruf al-halqiyya. Just carry on with it.
Yeah, sure. Next is the furthest part of the throat, Aqsal Halq. The furthest part of the throat, the area of the vocal cord, the articulation point of Hamza and Ha. The Hamza is emitted by the partial opening. The voweled Hamza is emitted by the separation. The non-voweled Hamza is emitted by closure of the vocal cord. Should I continue next?
Yeah, sweet. Keep going. We're on right heart now, is it?
All right. Okay. Yeah. So we have done Aqsal Halq. So next is Wastal Halq, the middle part of the throat. Region of the epiglottis is the articulation point of the letter Ain and Ha. Yeah. Okay. The next is the closest part of the throat. The region of the root of the tongue with the soft palate is the articulation point of the letter Ghain and Kha. And next is the articulation point of the letter Qaf, the furthest part of the tongue with the soft palate, Qa. There is a picture in the book, so we can see there is a vibration sign. So the Qaf is, it's the articulation point of the Qa.
Yeah, so with this one, we'll do a simple exercise. So if you've got your tongue So I'd like you to take your tongue, the tip of your tongue, and go as far back as you can in your throat. You should feel something that's quite soft and, you know, not hard. And then move it slowly forward. And then you start realizing there's a hard part. So basically, that's what the diagram means. With your tongue, I got you to touch the soft part. The soft part of the back of your throat should be where qaf comes from. The hard part is where kaf comes from. So this is really critical because, mashallah, a difference of, let's just say, 3 mils can change the difference between a cat and a qaf. Is that simple? So when somebody, and that's why we learn these diagrams as teachers, because when somebody makes this mistake, or can't differentiate between a qa and a ka, or a ka that sounds like a qa because it's mufakham and it's supposed to be muraqqa, which is light, then in this case we refer to that diagram. So inshallah, so this is qaf, we'll do kaf. Just go to the next one.
Yeah. The articulation point of the letter kaf, the furthest part of the tongue with the soft and hard palate. So from where the kaf comes out. Next is the articulation point of the letter jim, from the middle of the tongue with the middle of the upper palate. So it's the makhraj of jim. Next is the articulation point of the letter sheen, from the middle of the tongue with the middle of the upper palate. So from where we can pronounce letter sheen. Next is the articulation point of the non-lengthening alifia, from the middle of the tongue with the middle of the upper palate. The cause for differentiating between it and the lengthening ya was mentioned previously on page number 41.
Yep. So that's here.
So should we continue next page?
Yep. So we'll do a comparison between jim, sheen, and ya.
Right. Okay. So comparison between the point of articulation of jim, sheen, and the non-lengthening ya. Articulation point of non-lengthening ya. Okay, it's a picture actually. The first picture, the articulation point of sheen. You can see the vibration sign. So from where we can read letter ya. And the middle picture, you can see the articulation point of sheen. There is a vibration sign. So from where the tongue is touching the hard palate. So from where we can pronounce sheen. Articulation point of jim, you can see almost it's very close to the articulation point of sheen. Next,
Yeah. So here, as you can see with the sheen's got this unique characteristic where you need to have a little bit of an opening to let the air out. So you say ash. So you need to have a bit of a gap to let the sh out. It's one of the hams letters as well. So in the Jazariya, it says فَحَثَّهُ شَخْصٌ سَكَتْ. So basically these letters, they need to have like a ash or a t. Like that sound is known as hams, and that usually comes after the letters being pronounced. So with ja, as you can see, the air gap is a lot smaller, and as a result, it comes out a lot stronger, like edge. With the sha, you need the air to be out, and that's what's called hams. When the air comes out, then the execution is correct. With the edge is the opposite. The air doesn't come out. Now, what's unique about it, the reason why I did this example is as the Jazariya says as well, شديدها أجد قطن بكت. أجد قطن بكت are the strong letters. You can see that with edge, not ash. Ash, you need to release the air and the air dissipates. So here you can see what I'm trying to get to you is the less air you let out, and as you can see in this diagram, the stronger the letter is going to come out. And this is probably a point of collision, or some sort of really strong point. We'll cover this in detail, inshallah. Now we'll do bod. Bod tends to be a fun one.
The articulation point of the letter bod, the edge of the tongue with the nearby upper molar, the yellow color area of contact without pressure, and purple color area of the pressure. So the next is the space occupied by both of both edge of the tongue. We can see the area which is marked as yellow, and area of contact, the nearest part of the edge, and the green one is area of the pressure, the furthest part of the edge. So you wanna?
Okay, so just a quick question before.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, because I know there's gonna give a few people a few headaches. Does anybody understand that diagram, or do you need any further explanations?
I think Ustad, in the diagram, maybe we will mix the makharij. If it's possible, if you just on your camera and just explain us, I think it would be very helpful for everyone.
Okay, inshallah.
Yeah, so at least we can see, or either we can turn on our camera and you can make a correction. Otherwise, I think it will be very hard, because this subject is very important. And yeah.
Okay, inshallah. So I'll explain the points in detail.
Jazakallah.
Assalamu alaikum. I don't know if you guys can see me there, but basically I'll explain it in detail, inshallah. So for Bod is a tricky letter, because remember how we discussed earlier, we said there's different ways of getting the sound. We said you have to have vibration. Others, you don't need vibration. You just need to have a clear way of getting the sound. Others, it has to be by collision. Bod is a tricky one because it uses multiple parts of the throat. You need to know this diagram and how it works so that you can actually teach it to your students, because you will get a lot of people that can't pronounce Bod. So what does it say here? The key thing to remember, and you'll see this in Al-Jazariya as well, explains it in detail. Cross section, your tongue has to be a U-shaped. What does that mean? The tip of the tongue has to touch the top or the front part of the mouth. That's one. Number two, the back of the tongue has to be raised, like a U-shape, like or, for example. Just remember, like ra, or at the back, or like ah. With ah, you can feel the back of your throat being raised, like ah. So just remember, that back of the throat has to be raised while you raise the front of the tongue at the same time. So see, ah makes sense because it's easy to do because I'm lowering the front of my tongue. But I need you to raise the back of the tongue and raise the front at the same time. So that's number two. Number three, apart from having an air pocket like this, one or either or, so it could be one, either the left or the right side of my tongue, or both. That's what in Jazariya says in Al-Dras. That's why we study about the molars. The side of the tongue, either this side of the tongue touching the molars, that side, or both at the same time. So three things to remember. The front part has to be touching, has to be U-shaped. The back has to be raised. And either side or both at the same time have to make a pocket. So what you're trying to do effectively is make a pocket of air, like my Sheikh used to say, Sheikh Muhammad used to say specifically, the la is an explosive letter. So you have to trap the air in the roof of the mouth and then release it. So so you're trapping it. And you can't do that if the back of the tongue isn't raised. And you can't do that if you have a hole, let's just say, in one of your teeth or your tongue isn't raised. So what a lot of people end up doing, unfortunately, is they make a heavy da. What's wrong with da? Da. I'm giving you a practical exercise now.
I think there is a wall with it.
Yes, that's correct. There is a wall, it has to come. But how would you get a student to correct it? Dalin. Wala dalin.
So, yeah, please carry on.
Continue.
Go ahead.
So the difference between dalin and dalin means we are reading letter dal. So the articulation point of dal and dal is totally different. So it's a big mistake. Like
Yes.
in case of dal, so there is a tip of tongue and it's touching the upper part of front teeth, the base
Yep.
of the front teeth. So from where we can read letter dal. So and law you already explained from where we can read the letter. So it's really a different sound. So
Yeah,
it's
mashallah,
yeah,
perfect.
it's not dalin. Even some part of Pakistan, the people they used to recite zolin, which is also wrong. So it's not zolin, it's not dalin. It's basically dalin. Wala dalin. So yeah.
That's perfect. Jazakallah khair, bro. And that's basically it. So you can see it's all about the diagram. So some people, you'll try to say it to them. What they'll do is rather than saying a da, they'll say a heavy da, like mufakhama. And by making it heavy, they think, oh, that's it. But what you're trying to do, and especially when you're doing this on the internet as well, you're trying to explain this to them by raising. You have to understand. You get a letter to be mufakham, and if they're getting half the sifat correct, just get them to raise the back of the throat or the back of the tongue. Sorry, and that's how you get it to be mufakham. And it's not that much of it, but mashallah, as you guys explained, it's explained it really well. The trick is to law is getting that air pocket between the teeth, the front teeth. Oh, sorry, between the molars, the front teeth, and the raising of the tongue at the back of the throat. So hopefully that explains the diagram. So any questions about law so far? That's perfect, inshallah. Obviously, we're going through this really quickly, but once we get to the practical session, it's going to get more interesting, inshallah. So we'll cover. I'll get you to carry on, bro. We'll do the lam.
Yeah, sure. The articulation point of the letter lam from the nearest part of both edges of the tongue to the utmost tip. So from where we can read lam, we can see in the picture the tongue is touching the nearest part of the edges. It's actually the gum of the upper teeth. So from where we can read lam al, like the sound will be la al. So the next is the space occupied by lam for both edge of the tongue. Uh, the area of the lam from the nearest part of the two edges of the tongue to its utmost tip with what lies opposite to them of the upper palate. So there is a picture of tongue. They mention the end of the edge. It's marked as yellow. The nearest part of the edge, yeah, it's marked in yellow color.
Yes, that's a good point. So, what's the main difference between a heavy lam, a lam mufakhama, and a light lam, lam muraqaqa? Because think of it this way: when I say la,
Yeah.
it's the same articulation point, so it's the same
Yeah.
makhraj. But how do I get a heavy one and a light one?
The heavy one, I think, when we will be raising the back of the tongue, like al.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, means the light one is al, and the heavier one will be like while raising the back of the tongue al, like this.
Perfect. Yes, so it's the difference between, you'll hear this in Hafs as well. You hear Allahu nuru samawati wal ard, and then the other one is lillahi. So I'll need you to remember this because the next 2 or 3 pages are going to get really, really interesting. Articulation point is in Arabic is a makhraj. So it's basically the point of release of where the letter comes from. That's the makhraj. Sifa in Arabic is characteristic. So basically here, the example in this photo, a letter can have one articulation point, or you can have a letter come from more than one articulation point. But the sifa is what actually changes the type of, let's just say, frequency or final sound you get. For example, we said lillahi and Allahu. You can hear it salam, but mashallah, by raising the back of the tongue, I've made it either heavy or light. So by raising the back of the tongue, I made it mufakham. So just remember that. Even though you're at the same articulation point, you can have more than one sifa. This is going to be really critical for the next 5 pages. Oh, well, 5 pages onwards. So inshallah, I'll carry on with the noon.
The articulation point of the letter noon from the tip of the tongue with what lies opposite to it of the gum, a little below the articulation point of the lam. It is accompanied by hunna from the khushum. A scholar calls the tongue part of the noon the completed half, and call the nasal part the completing half.
Okay, so this is critical to remember because you'll hear us talk more about hunna as well as the comes or the nasal sound. This diagram is going to be really important. So everyone can see where noon comes from, yeah? Nah. So
Yes.
it's the tip of the tongue, hard palate near the teeth, yeah?
Yes. Yes.
So this is going to come in handy later on when you end up doing ikhfa, because ikhfa, nasal sounds and ikhfa tend to go hand in hand. I'll explain this. Just remember this diagram. This is going to come page 49. Read it in handy when we talk about maratib or the different levels of ikhfa. So just remember that. So hunna or the nasal sound is really tied to the noon. Just remember that. Inshallah, we'll start with ra.
The articulation point of letter ra from the tip of the tongue with what lies opposite to it of the gum, close to the articulation point of the noon. The gap through which a part of the sound passes when pronouncing ra, without which the articulation point would be locked completely, which would result in the forbidden repetition.
Okay. Yeah, so this is a tricky one. One thing to remember is don't make it repetitive. As we said, you can't say mir like this, because here that's just, vibration is key, as we said, because it's a key method of making a sound, as we said in the 4 points of this bab or chapter. But if you go like this, you made more than one. You're basically letting out too much air. So what you should do is you flick it once and you bring it back straight away. So you can't say Ar-Rahman, because here you haven't touched the front part that makes the ra sound in the diagram. And you can't say Ar-Rahman, because here it's there and it's sitting there for too long. The trick is to say Ar-Rahman and you flick it once. We'll cover this in detail, inshallah, with the practical sessions. But just remember that. You don't want to stay there for too long and you don't want to not touch it. And we'll do a comparison. Yeah, so yeah, just to read next one, bro.
Yeah, a comparison between the heavy ra and the light ra. The heavy ra is accompanied by curvature of middle of the tongue and narrowness in the throat, contrary to the light ra.
Okay, and same thing. It's like same articulation point. If you want to make it a heavy ra, you just raise the back of the tongue. So you got firqa. So the ra is a bit heavier. As if I carry on, the bit كل فرق فر. So just remember that, raising the back of the tongue and lowering it. Oh yeah, ta da and ta. I'll get you to do that one, bro.
Okay. The articulation point of ta, dal, and ta. The tip of the tongue with the root of the top two incisors, from where we can read ta, ta, and dal. So next is the articulation point of sod, sin, and za. The end of the tip of the tongue with the bottom of the inner surface of lower incisors. The sound is emitted over them passing between the lower and upper incisors, like as, and us.
Yep. So if you Arabic, you hear these as they label them as the whistling letters. If you ever hear me saying huruf al-safir or the whistling letters in English, you know it's the sads, sin, and zay. So that's what we talk about. The next one, bro.
The articulation point of wa and dal and tha. The tip of the tongue with the tip of the upper two incisors, from where we can read dal, tha, and wa. So the difference between the, tha, it's from the same articulation point. So
Yes.
wa is kind of a heavy letter, so we have to raise the back of the tongue.
Okay. So supposedly, if somebody came up to you and said, if they say zalimin, for example, what's wrong with that? Za.
So means we are reading not za, we are reading dal.
Yes.
So,
Like instead of zalimin, I'm saying it zalimin. What am I doing wrong here?
it's not heavy.
Yes.
Yeah.
The reason why it's not heavy could be because
You're not raising the tongue.
Yes. Yeah.
or like
Zal.
I'll say it again. So zalimin and zalimin. Just look at the diagram for a hint.
Okay.
Okay, I'll get you to look at the diagram on top of it. On top of page 51 for a hint.
I think one is pronounced as Zain. Zain. Yeah.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, so as you can see with the za, because it's a safir letter, I just need to pass the air through it. So what I'm doing here is it's more with the hard palate. But with the dha, I need my teeth to be touching. See what I mean? So what happens is that basically if you get a student that's doing it here, they're basically confusing the makhraj here. So I tell them, like, sounds a bit crazy, but it's as if you're trying to bite on your teeth. Dha, or the front two teeth to be specific. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's clear.
Alhamdulillah. So mashallah, you can see why these things are really valuable, because they help you, mashallah, troubleshoot. If you listen to something from a student, especially if you're teaching them as well, inshallah, once you get to that, really advanced level of picking things up, especially you're trying to certify somebody for ijaza, then these things will be really critical. And mashallah, the more that you know this, the quicker your student will be able to pick it up, inshallah. But mashallah, you're already picking up something is wrong, which is good. So we'll nearly finish about this. We'll do the fat right up to page 54, inshallah. I'll let you carry on.
Yeah, sure. The articulation point of fa form the inside of the lower lip with the tips of the upper two incisors, from where we can read fa. The articulation point of non-lengthening vowel by circling the lips forward and raising the furthest part of the tongue. The cause of differentiating between it and the lengthening vowel was mentioned previously on page number 41. The articulation point of ba by closing the two lips together, so from where we can read ba. The articulation point of meme by closing the two lips together accompanied by gunna from the nasal cavity. Scholars call the label part of the meme the completed half and calls the nasal half the completing half. Should I continue, sir? You want to explain?
So here we're talking about meme is pretty straightforward. So I'll just just push it from the lips, ma. It's not really that difficult. Next one's gonna be tricky, so I'll get you to do the gunna, nasalization.
Okay. Nasalization gunna as a letter. It is a sound emitted from khushum, the nasal cavity, which accompanies the noun and meme in all their cases, except that its length differ according to their status. which will be discussed in the chapter of the duration of the nasalization, gunnas, on page 152.
Okay, inshallah. So alhamdulillah, I think we've covered as much of the sifat as we can. Sorry, we talked about makharij and whatnot. So here you say nah, nah. Now, if I get you to close your nose and you say the same thing with a noon, say nah, nah. Why does it sound different?
Because while reading the noon, so there will be automatically gunna will be, there will be a gunna.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, so if you're closing, so the sound will be changed.
Yes. So that's what we mean by ghunna. If ever somebody says make a ghunna or make a ghunna sound or make a nasal sound, it's because the air isn't coming through the nose. Worst case scenario, God forbid, could happen if somebody has a cold, they might have a blocked nose. But just remember that when we say we need to do ghunna, like you hear people saying, for example, it's like, I will cover this in ikhfa actually, without confusing anybody. But basically, that's what is ghunna. Ghunna basically is like, think of it as like a small noon. And part of it comes from the nose, and part of it comes, obviously, from the makhraj, the nah. This will get covered in detail, inshallah. Any question about the articulation points so far? Because I'll have to admit, articulation point is the easy part. Sifat is the harder part. So if you have any questions, I advise you put them forward now.
Also, one question regarding the makharij. So we will do the practice later on because it's hard to remember the exact articulation point, because sometime later on, maybe after a couple of weeks or maybe after a month. So normally we used to pronounce the letter, but sometime it's not a right articulation point. So there will be a practice sessions as well.
With this one, because what we do, the book has practical examples we'll go through.
Sure. Okay.
So inshallah, we'll use those. Usually, as you know, I mean, the way I kind of did it is my sheikh is like, we'd have like a theory session, which was strictly book, and another one will be practical. So here, we'll just cover the practical ones that the book gives us, just in order to save up time on it. But don't worry, we'll definitely go through them, because the book, mashallah, is really good. It even gives you examples of mistakes that people make and how to correct them. So it's really good with that regard. So it's they really pick out the examples really well. So inshallah, we'll cover it. The way the book is structured, however, unfortunately, is that it lets you cover the sifat and the makharij, and then it gives practical examples. So it's it kind of assumes that you memorize them, but don't stress about it. We'll do more. We'll do practical stuff, inshallah.
Sure. Right. Okay. So there is a barcode on each of the pictures. So what does it mean? Means there will be like, if you scan the barcode, so there will be like a short video or something, or it's something entirely different.
Yes. So if you have the app that comes with the book, usually if you download that, inshallah, you can actually pick out the sound, so you can hear it on repeat. Mashallah, it's done really well, mashallah, the book. So every makhraj got his QR code.
Right. Okay. So what kind of app is, so we can install and we can use it? Is it mentioned somewhere in the book?
Brother, in the initial email I sent the link for the app as well. But if you just scan this barcode, it will pop up a video and with the sound. So with the app, the thing is that you don't need the barcodes then. The app has all the videos in the book, and you just click on the play button. But if you
Right.
don't have the app, because in the app you have to buy the app as well. In the app you have to buy the book in the app. But if you already have the book, you just scan the barcodes and it will pop up a video and with the sound.
Right. Okay. Okay. Jazakallah.
But if you still need the app link, just I'll send in the next email I'll send again the link as well, inshallah.
Okay. Jazakallah.
Right.
Ustad, could I ask a question?
You go for it, bro.
Yeah, so say for instance, some of these letters that have, is it the similar or same makharij, like za and yeah, is it exactly the same makhraj and we're just changing the sifat, or does the makhraj differ slightly?
So here it's pretty interesting. So if you really want to get the technicality of it, as we said, the Imam Jazari divided into 17, so it's 29 letters, 17 articulation points. الجزرية says مخارج حروف 17. What you'll notice is, because you and I have covered the advanced form of Dram in the past, is that you got مثلين متقاربين, or متجانسين. So I'm not going to cover this in detail. We'll do it later in the book. But basically, yes, you will get some points that are exactly the same articulation points. Others you'll notice they're really close, and others are just completely different. So yeah, it is possible to get the same articulation point. But what I'm trying to say is what makes each point unique and different is not the articulation point, it's the sifat as well. So think of it this way. If you want to buy a bicycle or a car, the articulation point is the bicycle or the car. The upgrades you decide to get on your bicycle or the car is the sifat. See what I mean?
Yeah, yes, alhamdulillah, definitely. I'm just wondering, curious, like when you add the sifat, are you not changing the makhraj slightly because it's all happening in the mouth?
Technically speaking, it should be the same makhraj, but by sifa here, actually, it's a good point. Technically, you're just adding layers of complexity on it. So you start off with the articulation point, and then the sifa is what gives it the unique characteristic. So like za and sa, for example, za and sa could easily get mistaken, but they're in the same category. You can hear they visually sound different, but because they are different in the throat and the mouth and the tongue, that's what gives a slight difference point. And I think so. I'll give you an example once we cover the sifat. So inshallah, I'll get somebody to volunteer for sifat, and we'll go through them inshallah. Any volunteers to read the sifat section?
Probably I can do it.
Oh, good. Go for it, bro.
Inshallah. Bismillah. Characteristics of the Arabic letters. What is meant by the characteristics of the Arabic letters? In the science of Tajweed, what we mean by characteristics of the Arabic letters is those characteristics which, distorting them, affects the sound of the letter, like whisper, al-hams, and apparent, al-jahr, lowering, al-istifal, and elevation, al-isti'la, contrary to the titles of the letters by which the letter is related to a certain area of the mouth, such as the shajariya letters and the nat'iyya letters. Characteristics of the Arabic letters. So there's two characteristics without opposites and characteristics with opposites. Should I continue?
Yeah, so we'll do the next one.
Inshallah. Characteristics of the Arabic letters with opposites. Number one, apparent, al-jahr, and whisper, al-hams. Number two, strength, al-shadda, and softness, al-rakhawa, and in between, al-bayniya. Number three, elevation, al-isti'la, and lowering, al-istifal. Number four, adhesion, al-itbaq, and openness, al-infitah. As for eloquence, al-izlaq, and abstention, al-ismat, they relate to the science of inflection and have no effect on pronunciation.
So I hope that answers your question, Brother Musa.
Yeah, pretty much, alhamdulillah.
So basically, yeah, every letter will tend to have 5 unique sifat characteristic. So they have a different combination. The exception to this is letter Ra. Inshallah, it's got about 7. So that's why it's quite complex. So that's why it is possible to get one articulation point, like one letter will come from one articulation point, and another one will come from the exact same point, but they'll sound completely different. It's because of all these different sifat. For example, you got jahr, let's just say qa. Qa has to be said openly, or hamza, you can't whisper it. But when you look like ta or fa, because you got the whisper, that sound of air, the air that comes afterwards, like the ha, fa, ha, like that. That's what they mean about whisper. Strength is huruf al-shidda, as we said. So you got ajj, add. What's unique about huruf al-shidda, ajid, qatam, bakat, the acronym that has these, a lot of these ones, ajid, qatam, bakat, a good number of them are actually huruf al-qalqala, surprisingly. And you can't say qalqala weakly. You got rikhawa, which are the relaxed ones. You got bayniya. Bayniya is an interesting one. You probably haven't heard this before. We'll cover it later. But وبين الرخو والشديد لنعمر. So basically, the poem says between the soft and the strong ones are the huruf of lin umar. So you got really strong letters, you got really relaxed letters, and you got ones in between. To get a strong letter, you need to have like constant pa. You need to have this burst of air, and it's short. With the relaxed one, it's not as sharp. It's a release of air over a longer period of time. Al-Bayniya is in between. You got الاستفال and الاستعلاء, إطباق الانفتاح. انفتاح is referring to openness. إطباق, we'll cover it later. It's like طاء and قاف, for example, but we'll do this later. إطلاق and asma are quite unique, but we'll cover them later as well. So hopefully, so when you look at it, when you combine all of these letters, oh yes, I'll get you to read the next chapter, brother. The characteristics of Arabic letters.
Inshallah. So the characteristics of Arabic letters without opposites. Number 1, whistling. Number 2, qalqala. Number 3, softness. Number 4, drifting. Number 5, repetition. Number 6, spreading. Number 7, lengthening. Number 8, nasalization. So yeah, in Arabic it's as-safir, al-qalqala, al-lin, al-inhiraf, al-taqrir, al-tafashi. How do you pronounce it?
التفشي.
Tafashi, al-istitala, al-ghunna. Alhamdulillah. So
So
go ahead, or
yeah, so basically تفشي شين وضال نسطة. So here, for example, sha got as تفشي. ضا has got استطالة. ضا. So you see how like استطالة, there's a lengthening in the ضا. تفشي sha. You need to have that openness and letting it out at the same time. So you see how these are the unique points that, and what's unique about them, they're reserved for unique letters sometimes. Like as we said about the istitala for the da and the tafashi for the sheen. You got safir, that's reserved for 3 letters. We said covered them earlier. Sa, sin and zay. A takrir, repetition that happens with ra, as we said as an example. Ghunna we've mentioned already with noon. Al-inhiraf, specifically reserved for lam and ra. You're going to have to memorize this now. I'm just giving you quick examples, just to refer back to. So we said there's letters with opposites, sifat with opposites, and sifat without opposites, which are quite unique. So I'll let you carry on with the whisper and apparent.
so whisper and apparent, al-hams and al-jahr. The Arabic letters according to the flow and imprisonment of the breath. So there are 2 types: apparent, 19 letters, and whispering, 10 letters. Majhura, mahmusa. So sakat, yeah.
Yeah, in the poem we say mahmusuha fahathahu shakhsun sakat shadiduha lafdhu ajid qatim bakat. So that's, this is the poetry, and that's how we memorize it. So fahathahu shakhsun sakat are all the letters that require hams. and that's how you memorize them. And everything else is just basically apparent. So we'll start with hams.
Inshallah. So whisper, al-hams. It is suppression in hearing as a result of the separation of the two vocal cords without their vibration and an abundant flow of breath. Masalan, sheen, a sheen. So a real picture of the vocal cords when doing hums.
Yes, so you need you need a little bit of air. That's what all hams is about.
So
Next
should go
one.
ahead.
Yep.
Apparent, al-jahar. It is clarity in hearing as a result of the joining and vibration of the two vocal cords and imprisonment of the breath. So, mathalan, alam, a real picture of the vocal cords when doing jahar. So, all good?
Yep, next one. Now this one's interesting.
Position of the vocal cords in the cases of al-hams and al-jahar. The vocal cords in the case of al-jahar in the letter zain or zai, it's closed, and the vocal cords in the case of al-hams in the letter sin, and the vocal cords are open.
Yeah, so you can see, mashallah. So it's basically we're talking about the same group of letters, za and sa. They're very close to each other, but my vocal cords is what gives away a different sifa. One is closed, one's open. One needs hams, one doesn't. So you can see, mashallah, it's that's what makes it sound different. So hopefully it's just something to remember. Inshallah, I'll do the next one.
Inshallah. Strength, ashidda, softness, al-rakhawa, and in between al-bayniya. The Arabic letters according to the flow of the sound in the articulation point. Three types: soft, between, strong and soft, and strong. The strongest shadida, ajidu, qatin, bakat, and between strong and soft is bayniya, lin, umar, and the rest of the letters then soft. All good?
Yep.
So strength, the first type, strength, ashidda. It is the imprisonment of the flow of the sound when pronouncing a strong letter due to the closing off of the articulation point. Masalan, jim, a jim.
Yep.
All good?
Yep.
The strong letters, ajid, qatin, bakat. The types: whispered, mahmusa, which is kaf and tha, and apparent, majhura. And I think there's this, formula for that.
Yeah, qutub, jad, and hamza. Release of the sound after imprisoned.
Okay. So these are all the strong letters, right? Within these things.
Yes, yeah. So basically here in the photo afterwards, he's just showing you need to release the air after you say the strong letter, like aqqa, abba. Oh, sorry, alta, abba. So you can see it's like without that release of air that I just trapped, I can't really get it out. So here it's we just gave an example of like, think of them as having shadda on them. Just remember that for huruf al-shidda. And most of them are from, obviously we said huruf al-qalqala. So, but there's a difference between the air that comes out from harf the letter of strength and the letter of whisper. For example, you got aqqa, ajj, hajj, for example. And you got fi shak, fitna, qatl. So you can see is like both have a sound coming out, but one's more stronger and one's whispered. It's more of a gentle whisper. You see what I mean?
So what's the purpose of the hamza, al-hamza here?
Hamza here is from here the sifa we're talking about apparent or jahr, right?
Yeah.
It just happens to be that it's from huruf al-shidda as well. So in order to pronounce hamza, you need to have it it can't be whispered. It has to be. It's the opposite of whispering. It can't be whispered. At the same time, it has to be pronounced strongly, like ah. So it's a strong letter.
Right.
I'll give you an example. So what do I mean by strong? I'm trying to think of a qira'ah right now. For example, you got antum, right? So you got two hamzas, right? Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, you're right.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's antum. If I say antum, what's different with this one?
So I think in the first is anthem, that's 2 hamzas, and then the second one is 1 hamza.
Yeah, so what I did effectively is I actually pronounced the first hamza. This in Hafs, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to start a new ball game. In other qira'at, they have something called tasheel. Tasheel, or easing of pronunciation, especially for hamzas, is correct in other qira'at, but not for Hafs in this specific case. So here, hamza is part of the majhur. It has to go ah. You can't say like really make it easier, for example. You can't say either. You have to say either. You see what I mean?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so that's why it's majhur and, it's apparent. So hopefully that answers the question.
Jazakallah khair.
Fine.
Should I continue?
Yeah, go for it.
Release of the sound after being imprisoned at the strong apparent letter. The pressure of the imprisoned sound behind the articulation point and its release define the sound's features. So 2 examples, the letter Jim when its sound is emitted. The letter Jim when its sound is emitted, and the letter Jim after the emission of the sound. So I think it's related to Aj, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Next one.
Release of the breath. Sorry?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Release of the breath after the imprisonment of the sound in the strong whispered letter. Note, strength, shidda, and whisper, hums in al-kaf and at-ta are characteristics in order, for those 2 letters are strong at their beginnings and whispered at their ends. Example, the letter ka, when the sound is imprisoned, the letter kaf after the release of the breath. So ak, is that right?
Yep.
So the flow of the breath after the imprisonment of the sound at the articulation point when pronouncing the strong whispered letter, this happens in al-kaf and at-ta. Ta. Softness, al-rakhawa. It is the complete flow of the sound of the soft letter when it passes through the articulation point. Example, ashin, ash. So next one is in between, al-bayniya. It is the partial flow of the sound in the articulation point of the in-between letter due to its incomplete closure. In between, al-bayniya in the letter al-lam. The partial flow of the sound when pronouncing al-lam due to the interception of the tip of the tongue to its release. So there's a picture of the front view of the mouth when pronouncing the letter al-lam. So al.
Yeah. Yes, al. So you can see with bayniya, now we're talking about the in-between ones. And as you can see, the lam and the ra, they have the characteristic of, as we said, inhiraf, which is digressing from the norm. So they are pronounced as the letter is rolling, as the tongue is rolling. And because they need that extra time, they're not regarded one of the strong letters. They need more time in order to be released. So yeah, continue, bro.
Right. So in between al-bayniya and the letter ar-ra, the partial flow of the sound when pronouncing a ra due to the interception of most of the tip of the tongue to its release. So picture is given, front view when pronouncing the letter ra, showing a gap remaining at the end of the tip of the tongue through which part of the sound passes. So ar, is that right? ar.
Yep.
Then in between al-bayniya and the letters noon and meme, the partial flow of the sound when pronouncing a noon and al-meme due to the opening of the nasal part, the gunna, and closure of the mouth part of them both. So maybe it's and an.
Yep.
Again, in between al-bayniya and the letter ayn, the partial flow of the sound when pronouncing the letter ayn due to the withdrawal of the epiglottis. Al-ayn,
Yeah, so here I'll cover the Bayniya really quickly. I'm not going to try to overload because everyone's pretty exhausted. I've got a schedule the time here for this course. So basically, Bayniya, we said there's the strong letters and then there is the relaxed letters. These are in between. They're not as strong as the strong letters because the air, rather being dissipated the one short go, it either goes in a different part of the mouth, like we said, as is the case with the ram and the lam. The air is actually going around the tongue or on top of the tongue. Or in the case of Bayniya with the meme and the noon, it's going through the nasal passage. So as a result, the air isn't rushing through one small gap. And as a result, they can't be strong. That's why. And they need more time to dissipate. The epiglottis, that's a tricky one. We'll try to cover that in detail later on. That's because of the time it takes to actually get the lisan al-mizmar to kick in. That's why it's layniya. So you got So you need to have that, you can't say too strong because you're actually choking yourself. You can't make it too relaxed. The trick is to saying it correctly. You need to have that to the back of the throat by 70%. And you have to let the air go through. So you can't say that's too strong, and you can't say really long. It has to be So let's try a practical example. So I'll get you to do the measuring duration of vowel sounds.
So measuring the durations of the non-vowel letters. The two types, the durations of the non-vowel letters are proportional to the flow of the sound therein. Yastabshirun. The durations of the vowel letters are equal. Kutiba.
So you see, so you got kutiba, and then you got the next one is yastabshirun. So you got kutiba, short, sharp. Yastabshirun. You guys can hear the difference?
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
I'll just get you to probably stop halfway on page 65 and we'll call it a session, and then we'll just pass the mic around to everybody just to have a practical example.
Inshallah. So durations of the vowel letters. The timings of the vowel letters are equal within one level of the levels of recitation, meaning the timing of the letters with a fatha equals the timing of the letters with a dhamma equals the timing of the letters with a kasra. So kutiba, ya'idhukum, su'ilat.
So can you see with the color code which ones are short, which ones are long?
So I think that all those with the harakat are same length, and then the one with sukoon, there's no length.
Well, yeah, because it's a bit sharper, I guess. Yeah. Sweet.
Is that right?
Yeah. So ones with harakat, yeah, basically they have to. You have to give them the equal portion. Like su'ilat, kutiba. So, and that's why it pays to read at a certain speed, because if as soon as you change speeds, your sheikh is going to, or qari, or whoever you're listening, muqra you're listening to, is listening to you, is going to pick up on it. So just remember that. I think it's been a pretty heavy session today. I can see next session is going to be practical. So it starts talking about the lengths There's example of Surah Al-Sharh, and then basically more sifat. Any questions so far about sifat in general? So we covered a lot today. We've done makharij, and we've covered a lot about sifat.
Jazakallah khair for this. Sorry, I just wanted to say that I had actually reached to this page before, but the way it has been clarified this time, I think it's much clear now. Jazakallah khair for this.
It's very appreciated.
Ustad, I just had a question about the last part. So the duration of the non-vowel letters, in the example, yes, tabashirun, the non-vowel, it means, for example, there's a wow there, which has no sound, is that? And the sakoon, is that part of the non-vowel? The
I
C
think talking
and the ba.
non-vowel sukoon here. It's talking about the ba. Yes, tabashirun.
The seen, ba, and noon in the end.
Oh no, here it's talking the non-vowel. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think that they're colored as well. Yes. Okay. The seen, ba.
Non-vowel sukoon. That's what they mean in English. If a non-vowel means sukoon.
Okay.
So the waw in roon is actually just extending the sound of the ru.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you think about it, just because it doesn't have a sukoon on it, especially in the rasm al-mushaf, or the writing of the mushaf, just because it doesn't have a rasm on it or haraka doesn't mean it's an automatic sukoon. Because there's a purpose for that one. As we said, there are other places in the Quran where they're not going to be, like for example, فَمَن يَعْمَلْ. Now here, it's technically a sukoon, but I can't call it a sukoon because you got obviously idgham. So it's there for doing something. But here, what the sheikh means specifically, non-vowel specifically means a sukoon on top.
Okay.
So it has to be sakin. If it has a haraka or mutaharrik, then it has a different face. For example, kataba. If I say masad, now the da has to be shorter in order to put the emphasis on the dal, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that answers this question.
Great. Jazakallah khair.
All good. Any more questions? You know what? I'll probably cover this section so that way we'll finish section 65. So here we talked about, that's what the Shaykh about means about equal lengths. Kataba, kutiba. If I put a sukoon, then obviously the sukoon is like having a stop sign. It's going to be harsh. Here, he's talking about timing errors which occur when pronouncing vowel letters. Prolonging the timing of a vowel letter more than the timing of nearby vowel letters is a mistake in recitation. Scholars call it stretching, tamteet, or insertion, idkhal. As in, I'll give you an example. You got فَمَن يَعْمَلْ. You don't want to say it as فَمَن يَعْمَلْ. What's wrong with that one? I'll read it again the correct way, and then I'll say the incorrect way. فَمَن يَعْمَلْ. فَمَن يَعْمَلْ. فَمَن يَعْمَلْ. That's incorrect. فَمَن يَعْمَلْ.
I think the transition from the meme to the ya is taking longer in the wrong one.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what was said to us in the comments as well. Perfect timing. Yeah, because as you can see, the reason why it's taking longer in the last example I gave is this, unintentionally adding a letter. And that's what the Sheikh has drawn there in the book. Yeah, he's drawn a Hamza. I'm reading it. It's like, it's like having an alif in between. You want to say it فَمَن يَعْمَلْ. You want to say it فَمَن يَعْمَلْ. You see what I mean? So that's a common mistake because people can sneak it in. It's like a half a harak. Another example. You got كنتم. كنتم. Now this is me reading it incorrectly. كذلك كنتم. كذلك كنتم. What's wrong with that one?
Yeah, I think the how to say, the joining from the kaf to the noon is, there's a gap in between there. It's elongated, I think.
Yes. I'm adding a
It's,
little. I'm adding a
yeah.
little vowel. كنتم is like because I said, if I say كنتم, I already said the ku and with the dhamma, but I'm adding another dhamma in between. So I'm splitting the word in half. I'm adding another waw. You see what I mean? So there's a difference between saying إخفاء مفخم كنتم and كنتم and adding another letter. See what I mean? I'll give you another example. This is going to be pretty obvious. إن الذين. Here's me saying it incorrectly. إن الذين. Where's the mistake in that?
Adding yeah.
Yes. So I'm adding yeah, I'm dragging it out longer than it should be. So that's one key thing to remember. So now you can go back to kataba, kutiba, su'ilat. So you can see these are perfect lengths. But in order to appreciate that, you need to see me reading it incorrectly, so at least you can compare them, compare the difference, see what's wrong. So at least now, alhamdulillah, we've got examples of how to say them correctly, timing-wise, and how to say them incorrectly. Inshallah, I think that should be all for today for now. And next lesson, we'll probably do Surah Al-Sharh. But before that, any more questions?
So, do we need to do any homework? We cover a lot of stuff.
Oh, yes, it's a lot of stuff. I don't expect you to memorize all of it at once. It took me months to go through the course book with my sheikh, so it's that's why I called it intensive. So what you'll notice is that as we start doing more practical surah, I might try and maybe sneak in another one or two surahs for practice, so at least we can at least relate the sifat to what we're reading. But basically, mashallah, is what you'll notice is that a lot of people, even if mashallah, the guys here in the class have been through Tajweed academies and stuff. If you don't freak out if you don't know the name of it, because you're probably already doing it in autopilot. But mashallah, this is now you're being more aware of your recitation. I don't expect you to memorize all of it at once, but mashallah, with practice, it'll be easier to memorize. So it's
Can
Yep.
I suggest
Yep.
something?
Sure.
I mean, based on the enthusiasm of people, if we get this kind of homework that by next week, memorize as much as for instance, the strong letters apparent versus whispered, or the different types of characteristics which are opposites or non-opposites, and their names. For instance, next time you say hums, so we know what hums means. So kind of those things that we have covered, if we try to memorize as much as we can, we'll feel like we are taking much along with us. Otherwise, we'll feel like we just it went above us and we didn't take along with it. So if some kind of that kind of a homework or something that try to memorize as much as you can, and then you can ask few questions from what we have done before and see how much we remember. That would be very nice, I think, for us to get some motivation as well.
Perfect. So it's best piece of advice, try and memorize letters. If you can't, do the groups. If you memorize the groups, you're not going to get lost in class, which is good. So if I say what hams is, obviously I can do that next class. I'll ask you what's hams, and then if you give an example of hams, or what's jahr, or what's shiddah versus lean. Or then I might give you an example of where there is no opposites. Like I'll say, for example, explain what safir is, or whistling, or tafashi, for example, or sitala, lengthening. Give an example of that. If you can memorize the groups, that's definitely the first step. Next step is memorizing the specifics. And the examples that the Sheikh gives here in the book, like Qutub Jad or Ajid Qatan Bakat, these things you would, whether you have, if you've seen them for the first time, that's not a problem. If you've been in a professional Tajweed or Quran Academy, if you've done Tuhfat al-Atfal or Jazariya, you definitely would have covered them in the memorizing the poem. Because what happens normally, I don't know if you guys are aware, but traditionally the poem is memorized first, and then basically the Talib al-Ilm or the student of knowledge is thrown in the deep end, and then there are like this technology thrown at their face. And mashallah, they're in panic because they've already memorized the matan, as we call it, or the actual syllabus. So normally it's done in reverse, but for us, we're doing it the complete opposite to them. So try your best, don't get overwhelmed. But this is going to come really in handy, especially when you're teaching. You'll be surprised at the things that, mashallah, the muqri'in can pick up, you know, like the hams was too short. Or for example, your ikhtilas here, you've actually inserted the 30% of a waw. Imagine that. So that's how they're able to pick this up, because they, mashallah, mastered these ones. Like I said, don't stress about it. The more you practice this, the more we do this in class, the more you'll pick it up, inshallah.
Inshallah, Jazakallah khair.
Ajmain. Any more questions? All good. That's perfect. We'll probably call it today for today, inshallah. And looking forward to seeing you next week, inshallah. SubhanAllah, bihamdik, ashhadu la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakumullah khair. Really appreciate it.
Jazakallah.
Jazakallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
The
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.